Okay, these are my grandparents. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Dolores Kruckow.
And I'm Walter Kruckow, her husband.
How old are you guys right now?
80.
I'm going to ask you questions about your life events in childhood first. As in, what year were you born?
1937.
Did your parents tell you anything significant about the day you were born?
No.
No.
Nothing significant happened? Why were you given your first and middle names? Do they have any meaning?
My first name, Dolores, was after a screen woman who name was Dolores Del Rio. I never heard her or seen her.
You just know that?
Yeah, my daddy's favorite,
What about your middle name?
May. And that was after my aunt, May. And it's spelled M-A-E.
How about Dad?
Let's see. Did your name come from anything?
Yes, it did. From my Uncle Walter, who was a naval officer. And my middle name, I believe, was part of my father's name.
Can you guys describe the neighborhoods you grew up in?
Mainly in Germantown. When I was 4 years old, we moved into our house there. And it was pretty well just, a lot of houses. A lot of fun, because we had a street right in front of us. And back then, you could go sledding on the hill there. The whole thing was a hill, and you landed at an orphanage at the bottom.
That sounds like loads of fun. What about you, Grandpa?
Well, part of the time I lived in a house that was owned by the company that my father worked for, called the Henry Diston Saw Works. It was very famous worldwide, and we lived there until he was forced to retire after the Second World War because of health problems. And then we lived in a house that had been a summer home for rich people along the river, but became homes for poor people because it had no running water, it had no indoor plumbing, it had no bathroom, it only had an outhouse over the river, and had no central heat, so forth. Very poor community. But we had lots of nice neighbors and friends, and a lot of fun playing games and growing up there.
Who would you say was more strict, your mother or your father?
I think they were half and half. I think they went together. If one said, you did this wrong and this is what we're doing for it. But my mother was the one that was around most, so it was probably her.
I would say my mother, because she's the one that really raised us, because our father was sickly and passed when I was 14 years of age, so she would be the one that would be the stricter one.
Do you guys have siblings, and if so, how many?
Yeah, I have 4 altogether. I was just trying to think of my sister, Tiny, was the oldest one, and then my brother Bob, and then me, and then on the other side, Pat, who is Patricia, and Ginny, which is Virginia, of course.
See, I didn't know what Pat and Ginny's names ever were before Pat and Ginny.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What about you, Grandpa?
Well, I had an older brother named Kenneth and a younger brother named Paul.
I lost where I was. Hold on.
Siblings.
Well, I just asked you that, though. I can't find... I skipped some. How did your family celebrate holidays? did you have any family traditions? If so, what were they?
Well, both Christmas and Thanksgiving probably were. Everybody came usually to Thanksgiving because they liked my mother's cooking. So most of the time we were there. Of course, as they got older, they came to our houses, you know. But at the house then, and Christmas was kind of, we stayed home mostly. Sometimes we would go to visit grandmothers, but sometimes that wasn't possible. So that's how it went.
Because of our family situation, we really did not have much in the way of celebrations at any particular holiday or birthdays.
What did you guys remember dreaming you wished you were when you were older? So what was your dream career when you were younger?
I don't think I ever had a dream career, actually. I just thought I'd get married and have children and raise my children.
What about you, Grandpa?
I, in high school, thought I would like to be a high school history teacher and coach track and so forth.
When did you guys learn how to drive? Who taught you, and what was your first car like?
I never learned how to drive.
I learned to drive. I taught myself to drive, having watched my friends. And when I was in the Navy, I bought a car. It was a 1947 Dodge. And I practiced driving around the base until I was ready to go take my driver's test when I was probably 18 years old.
Were there any phases that were popular while you guys were teenagers? And did you follow any of those phases or trends?
I remember in high school, Bucks were shoes that they had laces up the front, but the shoe itself was all white and fluffy and kind of like suede, I guess.
Did you ever have a pair?
Only after I graduated, because I never wanted to look like everybody else.
Grandpa, was there any trends that you followed in high school?
Trends I followed in high school. I guess wearing a school sweater with a varsity letter.
That all the girls wanted to take.
I bet. What was the best gift you ever received growing up that you still remember?
I think I was most, there probably were others, but the one I think of right now was getting a player for the newer kind of records, which were called
45.
45s, yes.
The best gift growing up, I would think, was probably a baseball glove that my friends bought me for my 16th birthday, I believe. They all chipped in and bought me a baseball glove because I didn't have one.
Did you guys have any pets growing up, and do you remember their names?
Not when I was born. I think they had gotten rid of a dog. It was called Ginger, and we had a picture of it to hang in our house when we moved. Like I say, I was only 4 years old then, so that was the only pet we ever had.
Did you have any?
We had several dogs. The one I remember most was like an Eskimo a white dog, and his name, they called him Whitey.
What were you like as a child? Would you say you were a good kid or were you a bad kid?
Oh, I was good. My mother and father both said they never had to give me a licking.
That's a judgment call, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was good.
You were good.
I was a Cub Scout. I was in the Boys Brigade.
What was your favorite memory in high school?
Wanting to come home.
My favorite memory of high school. Setting the half-mile record for my school in track.
And that ties into the second question. Did you guys play any sports growing up? And if you did, what were they?
I didn't really stick to any sports. I played volleyball, and the team I was on won, but then I never went back to it at all.
What about you, Grandpa?
Well, as I just mentioned, track, and cross country, and soccer in high school. I also, of course, as a kid growing up, as I said, with a baseball glove, we played baseball and touch football, so forth.
Did you guys have grandparents? Do you remember seeing them, and do you know when they were born?
I don't know when my grandmother was born, but she lived with us for a while. It was a little tight because we had 3 bedrooms and she had to take one of them, of course. So we kind of like slept together a lot. But it was good having her there. But one of the things I always laughed at is I'd go into the living room and she'd be sitting there with a book. We thought she was reading it, but when I looked closer, it was upside down.
Why? What was the problem?
Evidently, she couldn't read,
Oh,
but she wanted us to think she did. Either that or she was looking at pictures on.
did I have grandparents?
Yeah, did you?
No, I am an alien.
Well, everybody has grandparents, but do you remember them as a child? Were they ever
No,
around?
I never met my grandparents because my father came from Germany when he was a young man, and my mother came from Scotland when she was a young woman. So I never met or knew my grandparents.
Do you remember any big world events growing up?
Oh,
Or wait till I run and get that book. I just looked at it lately too.
Any that stick out to you that you vividly remember?
No.
what?
I have them all in a folder somewhere.
World War II, the atomic bomb, putting man in space on the moon,
That was a big one.
Vietnam, Korea, on and on it goes.
The men always picked those kind.
Well, world.
There was fighting,
No.
and we won.
That's all I remember.
Oh, I just lost the one I really wanted to ask.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy.
What was the first school you went to? If you remember. Or the first school you remember going to. Do you know the name of it?
Oh,
Pastorius Elementary School. They also started at kindergarten, so it's from kindergarten on until junior high. And that was, no, not that one. First school was Pastorius School, that was the elementary school. And then on to Wagner Junior High. And then high school was Germantown.
I went to the Henry Diston, or rather Hamilton Diston School, I'm sorry, kindergarten to 3rd grade, and then when we had to move out of the company house and go to the shack over the river. Then I went to the Henry W. Lawton Elementary School from 4th to 6th grade, and then to the Warren G. Harding Junior High School, 7th through 9th, and then Frankfurt High School, 10th through 12th.
How do you remember all that?
That's what I always say.
One after the other.
Do you have any childhood best friends that you still remember? And better yet, are you still in contact with any of those friends?
My friends that I remember the most of, there was 2 other girls. Vanetta Murphy was one, and Dolly Gable. Dolly Gable, I know, has passed on. Vanetta, I've never heard from again. And there were other friends off and on, but they were the ones that I was with most.
From church, and from the time we moved to the riverfront, a friend Phil Weber and Ronnie Walker. I'm still in touch with them, and they were in our wedding.
Did you have any heroes or role models when you were a child?
I don't remember any.
Superman, Captain Midnight,
Yeah.
Lone Ranger, Hopalong Cassidy. No, not really. The men at church, they were my Sunday school teachers and Boys Brigade and youth leaders, well, like teachers.
What was the first church you remember attending?
I remember one very vaguely because I was younger. We were still at the other house, so I had to be 3 or 4 years old. And that house was, what was the question again?
What was the first church you remember going
Church,
to?
okay. Yeah, I remember vaguely in that first house, my sister taking me to church. I think it had to be Easter. And I was all dressed up. I was like, Little Miss. Everybody look at me. At that point. I don't remember going back to it, and I don't remember the name, but it was in our first. The first that made any impression would have been when we finally moved to the second house, and that was in Germantown, and the little church was within walking. Mom and Dad didn't go to church back then, and so we would just walk up to church. They had Sunday school, and that was where I heard about Jesus, and that was where I accepted him.
How old were you when you were saved?
I would say probably around 9 or 10, somewhere in there.
Grandpa, what was the first church you remember? And then how old were you when you were saved?
The Holy Innocents Episcopal Church in Tacony, because my mother was from Scotland, so she was Episcopalian, and I just go to Sunday school there. But when we moved down to the riverfront, the Wesleyan Baptist Church sent out a bus to pick up, or cars, rather. A veteran from World War II used his car to pick up people to come to Sunday school, and then eventually the ministry grew and they had a bus and so on. And that's where I went to Sunday school and church. And I was 14 years of age when I asked the Lord Jesus to come in my heart and be my Savior.
I think that will wrap up part 1 for today, since we are running on 20 minutes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
You are
You're welcome.